We have 7 people there. Yes. Oh, wow, we got a lot of people. Oh, hi there, everybody.
Hi.
Hi there. We have a ton of people, and they're still coming in.
Okay.
And I see, oh, we have people connecting to audio.
Why is this? Oh, there you are. I'm like, where'd you go?
So, oh, we have somebody else in the waiting room. Okay, I think we have people kind of halted for a moment. So this is our regularly scheduled Woodstock Town of Woodstock Zoning Revision Committee meeting. I'm Laura Rickey. I am the chair of the Zoning Revision Committee. And so we do have, I see we have Jude Solano on, who's a member of the Zoning Revision Committee. I'm on. I thought I saw Connor. Hang on a sec. Yes, I see Connor on. So we'll give people another moment to join. We definitely have a full crew here. Okay, and we are recorded. So we have Linda Lever joining. And I know we're going to have, I know Jeff Collins will be joining. He's not on just yet, but we have a lot of people. Some I know, some I don't know. What we're going to be doing in this meeting is there's the document that was put together there's an STR report. We have an STR committee that provided a Woodstock STR committee provided a report. And as our zoning revision committee started talking about that, we also have members of the housing committee here, and the housing committee has opinions that they would like to share about the report. I'm just accepting somebody else here. So the housing committee has also some opinions and some thoughts to share on the report. So Kai, I understand that Kai had a lot to do with creating this report, and the purpose of this meeting is to have Kai talk about things in the report. And I tend to share my screen a lot, although it may or may not be a good idea for me to do that now, because if I share my screen, I can't see all the people and you can't see all the people, and I don't want to block off seeing when somebody has to be admitted. So in any event, I may wind up sharing my screen on the report, or if it's best for the group, I will, and if not. So the way we run zoning revision committee meetings, we have a lot of guests here. We don't normally have quite so many guests, but when we run the meetings, the members of the zoning revision committee, it's really our meeting. However, other people are, as the chair, I will call on people and other people can speak, but we want to make sure we get through the objective of the meeting. The objective of today's meeting really, the objective of today's meeting primarily is to hear from Kai and get his input. Kai works from the county. I definitely totally appreciate that Kai has taken his time to be here to share his thoughts. I also appreciate that the housing committee members are here to share housing committee member thoughts, but I think we're all Woodstock and we can meet. If we don't fit in this meeting, we can meet at a later time. And so the priority, in my view, today is to hear from Kai. So that's going to be the plan. I just actually printed off a copy of the report so that if I didn't share my screen, I would have it. I'm going to go grab it. It'll take me 30 seconds, and I'll be right back. And then we'll get going with Kai going through the report and giving his thoughts on it. So
It's
okay.
not working.
Laura, I can share my screen that has the report as well.
Okay. Well, the value of me sharing my screen is I'm a note taker, and sometimes I take notes right in the document we're looking at. So
Okay,
I'm
go
gonna
for
go
it.
get the hard copy because it may be handy for me to have it, but it'll
Sounds
take me
good.
30 seconds to grab it. The printer's just 2 rooms away.
This is someone trying to deal with the technical. Oh, she didn't want to be. She didn't want to be recorded or something. Yeah.
All right. Where did my thing go?
Folks might
Well,
want to
that's
mute if you're not muted.
Yes, and do please mute if you're not muted. So Kai, I guess what you're saying is it probably would be good if I did bring the document up, because then you can be talking to sections of the document. So I will go ahead and do that and share my screen and keep an eye out on the side to make sure. Let me just.
Is this expected to improve?
I'm sorry.
Well, I can try to do it. Send it over to the.
Okay, I'm not sure who's. So I am going to share my screen, and I'm just going to share, if I can, the one document. There we go. Okay. So I am sharing my screen. Whoop, where did it go? Let me bring it back up again. Okay, so I am sharing my screen. So Kai, now what I will say that I did for those that had to do with putting this document together, what I did with the document when I received it. So what I'm sharing here is I added page numbers. I forget how many pages it was when we got it, but anyway, I added page numbers. I added headers. So when I send a soft copy of the document out, if you are in your, and let me just show you, if you go into view and if you click on navigation pane, it will bring up this pane on the left. So by me adding in these section headers, you'll see them as a navigation, can make it easier to navigate. I did not change any of the words of what was said by the STR task force, but again, I did add the headers and the page numbers. And then we had a ZRC meeting to go through some things. So there are some things that I would have highlighted and some things that I would have put in blue if it was something that we did in the zoning revision committee. So unless it's marked in blue, it is something that would have come right from the STR task force. So with that as an introduction to the document, Kai, you're welcome to take it away.
Okay. Yeah, so Kai Lord Farmer, senior planner in the Ulster County Planning Department, focused almost entirely on affordable housing, helping different communities that have joined our Housing Smart Communities initiative on different pieces of the affordable housing crisis, one of which is short-term rentals. So take a look at the website. This kind of fits into our work as consulting and advising those communities. I also want to mention, I was invited by Maria Elena Conte, one of the town's board members, to join some of these meetings to help advise on the recommendations. All the recommendations in here are from the Town of Woodstock Short-Term Rental Task Force. What I did was went through and talked to them about how we could bolster the language and the citations to kind of reinforce the recommendations, but all the recommendations were there prior to me joining these meetings. So I helped clean up the document. I helped structure it a little bit more, structuring the recommendations around a couple objectives. It's a complex issue. Yeah, so just want to preface everything I'm gonna say tonight with that. So yeah, I think this was probably over like a month and a half period where I was meeting with the short-term rental task force. We had some clarifying questions at first, as you can see above, around for the town staff, town board. I'm not sure if those got answered around, how the regulations as they exist now were being enforced, whether there was capacity for enforcement, things like that. So we asked those questions around, non-owner occupied short-term rentals with the regulations around maximum of 180 days per calendar year with no more than 26 weekends or part of the weekends included. I was curious how that was being monitored or enforced, just because that is a pretty specific
Yeah.
piece of the regulation.
Who's gonna enforce it?
What else? Let's see. Yeah, this piece about non-owner occupied ownership or corporate or individual ownership and how that was being verified. Another one that's pretty difficult to do. 3 or more violations of local laws may lead to revocation of an approved SDR operation permit. It was a little unclear what is considered a violation and what the process was for tracking those violations and enforcing them. These are more like internal operational questions for town staff, of like, how is it going? If there were to be updates to the short-term rental regulations, what would it make sense to update in terms of like capacity and efficiency and all the things that the code enforcement officer is doing, or code enforcement officers are doing day to day for enforcing this regulation.
Rather.
Put some
And the code
background
enforcement
context in here for myself as much as anyone else. Like, what's the timeline look like? So starting in 2019, the short. Do you want to have people mute if?
Yeah,
not
everybody
muted?
should mute. Everybody except for Kai. Everybody except for Kai should be on mute.
Thank you, Laura. I'm not gonna walk through all of this here, but yeah, 2019 was the original short-term rental. 2021 approved a 9-month moratorium. This was during the COVID-19 pandemic. In July 2021, the STR task force was established for recommendations while that moratorium was in place, and that's where I kind of stepped in 2022 after that SDR had been meeting, the task force had been meeting for a while. I put in some numbers here. These are a little out of date at this point, but yeah, 486 short-term rentals, both registered and unregistered. The county has data on all the registered and all short-term rental activity in the entire county because we collect the hotel occupancy tax. So yeah, at the time, fall 2022, there were 486 short-term rentals, both registered and unregistered, approximately 296 registered as of October 2023. I think later on, this is a note from the blue is from the zoning revision committee.
Right.
Yeah, they'll have closer numbers or more up-to-date numbers on owner-occupied versus non-owner occupied.
So I would like to ask you a question if I may. So that is, so you know who you're getting hotel occupancy tax from, but how confident are you that there aren't people out there renting STRs that aren't telling you either and you're not getting occupancy tax?
So the data that we have, we're sending out tax bills for the hotel occupancy tax, but we have a contract with a company called Granicus, and they do online data scrapes from, I think it's 70 different, not 70, pretty much all of the different short-term rental websites that you could potentially list on. And they do, I think it's every other day, they're doing tracking and inventorying of all the activity. So whether they're registered with a town, whether they're registered with the county to pay their hotel occupancy tax, or whether they're not registered at all, we have some estimate on what the activity is.
Okay, so you feel because of Granicus input, you feel pretty confident you're catching everybody because Granicus would let you know.
Yep. And it fluctuates obviously, but yeah, we're very confident that we're tracking the activity. How much activity that is for each short-term rental varies. Some people have it on for a month, some people are doing it year round.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? I'll be talking about this after Kai's done. That's part of my presentation. Granicus.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Just
yeah.
an FYI. So you don't.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mentioned them a little bit further, but yes, Laura, to answer your question, I'm very confident in.
Okay. And then the other question is, since you know since you as a county have a pretty good feel of who all is actually doing short-term rentals, do you already carve out and say, hey, here, Woodstock, here's what's going on in Woodstock? Are you like giving our building department, for example, a list of what you know?
Yeah, the town of Woodstock and a number of other municipalities have memorandums of understanding with our finance department, who keeps the Granicus account.
Right.
And so I think it's quarterly, but upon request, you can request however much you want. We'll send you a list of the addresses in your specific municipality.
Yeah. Okay.
So for a code enforcement officer, you know, however often they're doing it, compare your list of your registered short-term rentals and the full list of activities that are happening in your community.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Sure. They also have data on like whether they're renting out a room, whether they're renting out the whole home, how much activity, how many nights per year they're renting it. Yeah, I'm not going to go into too much more detail. One thing I will mention is like as you're going through this process of potentially updating your short-term rental, this is our, this is the short-term rental task force's recommendations. You would then kind of formalize those recommendations, with the ones that you feel are appropriate, and then go through the process of actually updating your regulations. But then, because it's related to zoning, this would get referred to the Ulster County Planning Department and the Ulster County Planning Board through the formal referral process, similar to what's happening with the zoning code or happened with the zoning code in Woodstock. So there'd be a whole nother round of review from our department once the actual updates to the zoning code are made. So I just want to mention that.
Yeah, okay. And what I'd like to mention too, because we have a lot of people on this call who might not be aware, but where this stands is there was, as you mentioned, the STR task force, the Woodstock STR task force convened, built this report as their output. It's now come to the zoning revision committee because what we have done on other topics, and now we're taking on the STR topic, is we have actually converted what people have been saying. We're converting what people, they want improvements here or there, and we've converted that to actual law language. So in this document, I saw some law language, but but it wasn't fully, here's the proposed new law. So we'll be converting. We want to take the ideas, what we think we want to do, and we want to, the zoning revision committee, what we do then is we convert that into language, and then that's the proposed law that, as Kai mentioned, that's what will go to different bodies, the Woodstock Planning Board, the Ulster County Planning Board. It'll go eventually to public hearing to the people. So we're at the very beginning. We've recently picked this up, and we've just had, this is our second meeting, maybe third meeting, really going through, and we want to start with the STR report in any event. So we, as the zoning revision committee, are building our knowledge on the topic and gathering opinions, starting with Kai. Our next formal group will be the housing committee sharing opinions, and then we'll be deliberating and translating things into legal, zoning language. So that's where we are in our process.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, this is kind of the beginning of a long process, or somewhere in the beginning. Yeah, so my work at the county really is focusing on the housing crisis and affordable housing. So my angle and our approach as the county and the county planning department is, how do we help local municipalities address the housing crisis, ensure there's affordable housing for residents in the community. And so there's a lot of different aspects of short-term rentals. There's nuisance, there's there's various pieces of, and then there's also, tourism, attracting tourism, and there's a balance to be created in every community. But I just highlighted here, based on trends of supply and demand, a healthy vacancy rate for a community is around 5%, meaning for sale or for rent, there should be around 5% vacancy, so that there's enough supply where the demand is not outweighing the supply and increasing prices. And we've been in a situation for many years where the demand is far outpacing the supply. That's for long-term rentals and for sale units. So when you have your vacancy rate below 5%, it tends to increase rental prices and increase home sale prices, which puts pressure on low-income residents, can price people out of living in the communities that they've lived in for a long time. So I mentioned this kind of like rule of thumb here, 5%. And then I put in a bunch of links to different resources on how short-term rentals or an overabundance of short-term rentals can negatively affect or can increase prices of rentals and of home sale prices, because essentially you're eating up the long-term rental supply, and you're converting those to short-term rentals, which decreases your long-term rental supply and can increase rental prices and home sale prices. And there's a lot of academic evidence and otherwise to prove that. And so I pulled some data from 2022, I believe, showing that the effective vacancy rate for rent units and for sale units versus the total number of units to be 1.2%. And I think looking back, that was the case. It's been under 5% for many, many years. So it's just kind of demonstrating the issue. This isn't all due to short-term rentals, but there are a lot of short-term rentals in Woodstock, and so it's very likely adding to the housing crisis and housing affordability issues. So that's kind of the context. And then again, I helped the STR task force organize these different recommendations into a couple different kind of objectives to better get a sense of, what's the overall goal of these recommendations, because all of these recommendations are trying to achieve different things. So the first, wow.
Yeah, and I'm going to break over. I'm going to peek at the chat real quick, just because oh, there we go. Maria Elena is. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything that we should know in the chat. And I knew it was going to block the screen. So, okay, so we're good.
And I don't, yeah, I don't want to like, I can spend as much time on this as we want, but I don't want to like overdo it. So if I'm going too long, please stop me, Laura.
Well, everything you've said so far is very helpful, and you're really educating us and helping us have the right mindset as we proceed. So I
Sure.
thank you for everything you're sharing.
Yeah, so I'll go through each of the like objectives and the recommendations under them that the STR task force created. We made some recommendations to updating definitions that are kind of in the regulations as they exist now, but like adding a little bit more detail and clarity. So I'm not going to read these definitions, but the big change really is, you define short-term rentals, but then you're defining them into different categories. Short-term rental home is one where at least one or not more than 2 bedrooms are being offered for rent. So this is non-whole home rentals. And then short-term rental full permits. So this would be a whole home being rented for a certain amount of time. So this is kind of a hybrid, but and moving away from the language of owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied for a number of reasons. This is mirroring what the city of Kingston just did with their zoning code update, which included updates to their short-term rental regulations.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple questions there. So first off, by changing these short-term rental home and full permit, so those are the only two. So those are the 2 types of short-term rental. But as you say, at least one, not more than 2 bedrooms. Well, if somebody had an accessory dwelling unit that was an efficiency size anyway, only has 1 bedroom, would that be a home or a full? Because you're renting the full building, but it's only 1 bedroom.
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean it's a full unit. And so I think it's yes, it's a bedroom, but it is also a full housing unit. So that would be a full permit.
Okay, well, okay. So then, I'm sorry for being picky here, but
sure.
But when we write the law, it has to be clear.
Absolutely.
So technically speaking, you might have a 4-bedroom house, and if you rent 3 bedrooms, you're not renting the full house, but it doesn't qualify under home either because it's more than 3 bedrooms is more than 1 or 2. So
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can't really see a case where someone would be renting 3 bedrooms, but as you're saying, these definitions could use a little more work. Obviously, this is the short-term rental task force's recommendations to the zoning review committee. So obviously it's going to need a little massaging here.
Well, that's okay. But I just want you. I'm hoping to understand from you the intent, because by knowing the intent, we can make these modifications. Without
Sure.
knowing the intent, we're afraid to change anything because we weren't sure what the intent was. If the
Sure.
intent is STR full, is you're renting a full building. If it's an ADU, it's a full building. If the intent of STR F is you're renting the full building, and short-term rental home is bedrooms out of a home, but not all of them, then we can make that if that was the intent. I just didn't know what the intent was.
Yeah, I think the intent, and I don't want to speak for everyone on the task force here, but the intent really was creating a balance between folks who want to rent out a home, a bedroom in their home to supplement their income for a certain amount of time, whether that's 1 or 2 or 3 bedrooms, with homes that are being bought and used as short-term rentals full time.
Okay.
And we put some further on, we put some recommendations on.
Okay. So I'm just going to add some words here. So this is meant to be renting out a part of a home, a part of a dwelling, renting out a part of a dwelling. I'm going to make it blue so we know that I added it. Renting out part of a dwelling, and the idea of full is renting out or purchasing, as you say, purchasing for the purpose. Here is Jeff. Okay, purchasing for the sole purpose of STR rental, a complete building. So my example of it, if it's an STR and you want to rent a full STR, that's not really full because that's renting out part of your property. But okay. So if it's an part of a dwelling, although an ADU is another dwelling unit.
Sure.
So but if you're buying an entire property, purchasing a property.
I think this was
for the sole purpose of STR rental, the entire property.
Sure. We also
Woodstock
put this.
can't even enforce. They don't have any code enforcement officers that will actually do their job.
Well, now I'm sorry. So here's where, as the chair, Kai is the speaker. I might ask questions. The ZRC can ask questions, and I would ask other people to hold your questions for later or put them in the chat, because we're not going to derail the meeting. We're here to get what the intent is and what the law should be. That's the purpose of this meeting, and that's what Kai is here to help us with.
Can I jump in really quick? Can you guys hear me?
Hi, Connor. Yeah, you remember the ZRC? Yes, please.
So real quick, Kai, thank you so much for this presentation. Just wondering on the short-term rental full permit, when I'm thinking about the intent of this section is to, again, separate people who want to rent a room versus people who essentially take an address off the market, and I wonder if attaching to the full permit some sort of I guess here's my question. If someone were to say, again, rent 2 out of their 3 bedrooms, but there's still no one really dwelling there, it's not owner occupied, and there's no long-term tenant, would that qualify as a full permit? Because in the spirit of things, to me, that address is the market.
Yeah, good question. Let me read these definitions again to make sure we were covering those bases. Yeah, I mean, I think these could use some revisions. These are based off of the definitions as they exist now.
Sure.
So I think yes, the moving away from owner occupied and non-owner occupied is a good thing because of case law that kind of suggests that communities should move away from those definitions. But I think the intent here, as Laura kind of pointed out, is that short-term rental homes are really for folks who live in their homes but want to rent out 1 or 2 bedrooms, and then short-term rental full permits are yeah, for folks who are renting out, buying a property to rent out full time. So yes,
So,
I could see some situations where someone is kind of trying to sneak around using the full term sneak around a full permit by renting out their homes. That would have to be
uh,
combed through and building in some protections against that.
so Laura, if you wouldn't mind for us to come back to it later, would you mind making a note on the short-term rental full permit? Just a question of, um, you know, the threshold of full home. You know, like should renting out a space be a qualifier, or I know we're moving away from owner, non-owner occupied, but having some sort of occupancy language in there so that, if an address is off the market, we're not just handing out
Yeah, and
rental
I'm
homes.
here. I'm hearing most of what you're saying, but it's a touch tinny. So here's what I wrote: question the threshold, the occupancy language. Oh, did you want me to make another note?
That I'll remember what this is. That's good enough.
Okay.
Thank
Okay, thank you.
I
And I'm
also
just gonna
want
do
to,
Laura, can I say something?
who is that speaking?
It's me, it's Jude.
I'm sorry, who's that? Oh, Jude. Yes, please, Jude. Go
Jude,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. So my understanding about the owner occupancy rules is that you can't prohibit someone from having a short-term rental. It has to do with interstate commerce and so on. But I would think we could still differentiate in terms of how we give those permits out, that there are different rules for those who rent out a room in their house while they're living there, as opposed to what's being called the short-term rental full permit.
mhm,
I'm pretty sure we can still do that.
absolutely.
Okay, so we can make that differentiation as long as we don't prohibit someone from doing a short-term rental because they don't live there.
It's
We
not
can
their
we can put all
primary
kinds
residence.
we
Yeah.
can we can put all kinds of restrictions on it. We can put limitations. We can put
Yep.
numbers. We can do all kinds of things. We just simply can't prohibit it. Is that right, Kai?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Can I talk
And
about that
I'm
for a
not an
second too?
attorney, but
Yeah.
that's generally the understanding.
Yeah,
So-
go ahead, Jeff.
So we talked with Granicus about this. So as we all know, the New Orleans district ruled basically how they ruled, meaning that you could not prohibit non-owners from STRing. That's the only district in the country that's ruled that way. There was a ruling in New Jersey, which is part of our district, that ruled the other way. So at this point, there's nothing wrong with us saying non-owner occupied can't STR.
Yep.
And that is also sort of the core of my question from before, and maybe it doesn't come across in the note, is again, to me, the intent of this is to keep is to protect the housing stock. So if we start from there rather than just general occupancy, is there a unit in this house that is ostensibly permanently occupied or not?
Jeff, can you provide us with that ruling at some point?
I'll take a look at it. I'll see if I can find it. But it basically,
I can share that as well.
Okay, thank you, Kai.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kai, so again, Kai,
Can I say really quick? I'm going to be talking about this in the next presentation. Just
yeah,
I have actual law code zoning stuff, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, and
answers.
yeah, and we're gonna want to hear what you have to say, but we again, Kai is going first, so and we may actually get to you at the next meeting. I hate to say it, but anyway, just being realistic. So, but we're going to go through Kai and the whole document, and then we'll go through housing, the housing committee's comments. So Kai, so just to recap what you said, so we want to avoid, in your thought, we want to avoid the owner occupied versus non-owner occupied designations, but we can still say you can rent out part of a dwelling unit. We can still have different rules and different thresholds for renting out part of a dwelling property versus renting out the whole property.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
okay.
and I mean, I'm conservative in my recommendation. This is also the recommendations from the short-term rental task force, not from me personally, but Jeff's point is important to note that different districts have ruled differently on the interstate commerce clause issue.
Right.
The Jersey City case, I think it was, is a little bit different. But yes, as it goes, different districts rule differently on the owner occupied versus non-owner occupied thing. I think you can still achieve the same objective essentially, not using owner occupied and non-owner occupied, but I don't want to make a strong recommendation either way. I think it's up to the town and the attorneys that the town works with to make a recommendation on whether you want to use that language.
That's a good point. So, and one more question. Let me make my note and then let me ask my question. So my question is going to be back to the ADU. So an ADU, if somebody is in a house, which maybe they're renting it out, maybe they live there, we don't know, but they create an ADU. So was it your intent again that you can't create an ADU for the purpose of STR? If you're going to create an ADU, you are by definition renting out the whole thing. You're renting out the whole ADU, but you're not renting out the entire property. You got a house on the property and this little building that's an ADU. So would you call, after thinking about it, I know I asked the question before, but I'll ask it again. Having thought about it, would an ADU be a full, because you're renting out the entire building, but it's not the entire property, just a little building on the property. Would that be full, or would that be kind of like one room? Like,
I mean, for the purposes of finding a balance between long-term rentals and short-term rentals, that would be considered a whole unit. Like it's a whole unit that can be rented out as a long-term rental unit.
Right. So you're going to count that as full. So your thought is count ADUs as full. Okay. All right. Thanks.
I also want to point out too, like, I think this was in the original definition, or the regulations as they exist now. But for short-term rental homes, you are allowed to rent the home for a certain amount of time per year, but it's limited to 60 days, and that's like adjustable. You can ramp that up or down. So if you're going for, if you live there and you're going away for a weekend, you want to rent it out, and you're supplementing your income, that's great.
But is that considered home or full? Because if you're leaving and somebody's using the whole house, but they're only using it for a weekend because you live there, but like you say, you went to Florida for a month and now they're in there, is that full or home?
Well, so in the definition as it exists in this recommendation, and also I'm pretty sure in the regulations as they exist now, this is still allowed.
Well, allowed, but I mean, would you call it home or full?
So in the definition here, 60 days or less is home.
Okay.
And I think the adjustment here is really, you want some freedom there, but you don't want it to be so flexible that someone could buy a home and only rent it 60 days a year and still use it full time as a short-term rental. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay.
So that, is it 30 days? Is it 40 days? Is it 60 days? I think that's something to consider for the various bodies that will be crafting the zoning law updates. Okay. But the idea is that you're not able to use it full time. If you want to use it full time, there's a full permit.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. All right, so that sounds good. So I'm good.
Okay. There's definitely, this is a really important part of this because I've been looking at other, the recommendations from the short-term rental task force with my help. We're looking at the City of Kingston zoning code update, but also others that kind of block it out, the definitions this way. So that you do really find a balance between, is this my home and I want to rent it out for the weekend, or 1 or 2 bedrooms as Airbnb and others used to be? Or is it kind of this commodifying the short-term rental market to make money, which is eating into the for sale homes or rental units in communities?
Sorry, I was adding one more little note there. So, okay. All right.
Okay.
So I'm good moving forward if you'd like to do that.
Okay. And I think these, I already said this, but these need more massaging.
Yeah, and that's okay, but you're helping us understand the intent, so we're
Sure.
good.
Yeah, part of this is setting up what I'll talk about later, which is like setting caps on short-term rental full permits, or setting caps on both full permits and home permits, or leaving home permits without a cap.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm taking a moment to read the chat just to make sure we're not missing anything that we should be. Yeah, okay.
Dwelling unit, I'd like to note here, this definitely needs to, this has been a while since we were crafting these recommendations. I think this was based on what the zoning code has right now, but obviously as the zoning code update moves forward, or if it passes, then this needs to align with what a dwelling unit is considered. So this kind of clears up your question around is a ADU a full permit or a home? Technically, it would be a full dwelling unit. Under
a full permit, STR full. Okay.
Full permit, but also just like it's a dwelling unit. An ADU is a accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving along.
So I don't know if we want to look at the dwelling unit definition or just move up to the first objective.
I think this is the standard definition in your zoning code. So I don't think it just wasn't there was no definition of dwelling unit specifically in the code. So either in the regulation, make a reference back to the zoning code of what a dwelling unit is, or put the dwelling unit definition in there. I think this also was getting at the issue of like, can you rent out a RV? Can you rent out, a tent in your backyard? And so, there's a potential to really focus on just giving permits for dwelling units, which would not include things like an RV or a tent platform or something like that.
Although this definition of dwelling unit doesn't actually say anything about RVs or tents, that they're excluded.
It doesn't say, but I think this wouldn't include them. Building entirely self-contained portion thereof, containing complete housing facilities for one family, including domestic, having no enclosed space, cooking, sanitary facilities in common dwelling unit. Yeah, so I think this needs a little crafting as well. But I think I pulled this directly from the zoning code.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, again, my only hope here is that we understand your intent, because we can massage it later if we understand the intent. So
I think okay.
Okay.
So objective 1, and what essentially before I came to help, there was a lot of recommendations, but it wasn't like they weren't organized necessarily. And so the intent here is like, let's categorize them in the intent. So this first set of recommendations is to preserve community character, limit nuisance, and ensure health and safety. So we wrote a little context here of like why we're creating these recommendations. What's the intent? What are we trying to not have happen? So there's some health and safety issues, obviously, and also some nuisance issues that have been, brought up in the community. And so that's really the intent of trying to tamper down on those nuisance or other issues. This first one is a recommendation from the short-term rental task force. Again, they're all short. These were all here before, but the intent was that if you've got so many short-term rentals especially in the hamlet, that they overrun entire neighborhoods for full short-term rentals, that there is a loss of a sense of community. Where if you're the only person on your block, that's a full-time resident, there's a loss of a sense of community there, which is important to protect. The other thought here is that, climate is a big issue, walkability is a big issue, and so if you've got too many short-term rentals in the hamlet, then you're excluding folks from living there full-time, which are the more, dense, walkable portions of the city or the town where you may not need a car.
But what's it saying? So you're saying that sometimes some long-term rentals need walkability. So if you're stealing that from them, if the STRs take over all the center of town where you don't need a car, then your people that need affordable housing who can't afford a car can't get there either.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Or choose not to use a car. Right. But yes, especially folks who can't afford a car.
And if I could just actually, Verena, was there any studies done about that, or was there any specific recommendations about that in your presentation coming up?
About spreading it around different hamlets and versus in one concentrated area?
Well, I mean, yeah, essentially limiting the number of permits per district.
Yeah, I mean, the missing middle, and land use planners talk about that a lot. But that's something also Complete Streets would probably have a lot of research on as well.
Yeah, I would just say that's a good one to come back to.
Yeah.
Right, sorry about that. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, that is really the intent of like, you want more dense walkable neighborhoods in general. It's hard to recreate that once they already exist, like how old the town of Woodstock is. A lot of those homes were built before people owned cars. And so you want to prioritize people who are living there from a planning perspective and land use perspective, as Urine is saying, for folks who can walk or bike to their destinations rather than get in a car.
I think the bigger picture overarching goal is always to look through the lens of balance. That's kind of what we do. I think that's what this is doing, what we're all talking about at the end of the day.
Excuse me, Kai.
Yep.
Can we get the list of what homes are being rented as STRs from the county? Can this committee get that list?
I am not sure about that. I think it's.
I'll be talking about that in my presentation as well, just FYI.
Thanks, Serena. I think the memorandum of understanding is between town staff because there's some privacy issues. But I'll go back and Jude, I'll follow up on that question. Because the memorandum of understanding really is intended to provide that information so that municipalities can enforce the regulations that they do have while also protecting the privacy of the homeowners.
I understand. I get it. But it would be helpful for us to know where the majority of these are being rented. So if it's possible, or maybe there's a breakdown by hamlet or something, or neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to, we could do like a mapping exercise to understand where they are and anonymize them.
Okay.
I would have to think about that a little bit. But sure, yeah. Okay.
So if you provided a map where maybe on a street, you put some dots on the street, so we don't know which houses there really are.
Yeah, exactly. Or like
okay.
you can do densities without giving exact locations.
Right. And I think that would be what would be helpful.
Yeah. I didn't get a chance to read all these notes in detail of the zoning review
I'm sorry. Oh,
but
yeah. Well, oh, so we just had some, if I scroll down, we were kind of brainstorming, throwing ideas out. Again, I just put it in blue so I capture what everybody had said, but we haven't made any decisions on these things in blue.
sure.
It's just people said them, they thought them, so I just captured them so we could make a decision later about them.
Sure. Yep.
So, but there were some, I guess some thoughts though. Again, maybe we can set caps in different parts of town. I don't know if there's any reason why we couldn't set caps in different parts of town. We have different districts. We have R3, R5, R8. We've got the Hamlet commercial. We got Hamlet residential. So, is there any issue that you see with us setting caps in the different districts?
Nope. I've seen it in other communities.
Mm.
You know, you just have to kind of like be very clear about what the intent of why you're setting caps in different places.
Okay.
Okay, moving down 1B, non-permanent structures. Okay, yeah, this kind of gets more at what I was trying to point out before. Town board should update the STR law to specify that permanent dwelling units as defined in the Woodstock Municipal Code be granted permits for STRs to avoid rentals of RVs, trailers, tents, non-permanent structures.
Oh, okay. So that goes into that.
Yeah. So we didn't make that definition. We're just saying, you know, if you're going to update the short-term rental regulation, make sure that you're really focusing on permitted, meaning like have a certificate of occupancy dwelling units versus mobile structures.
Okay. So one thing before we go on, the one comment that's in blue here that I want your opinion, I'd like your opinion, if I may, is somebody threw out the idea, someone on the ZRC threw out the idea of maybe having like a rotation, that if we have a cap and then there are some people who can't get an Airbnb, can't get an STR because the cap is already reached, maybe having the next year either like a lottery system or a rotation that says, well, you know, we're going to rotate you out and then you go to the back of a line. Say after 3 years, you go to the back of a line. So that by definition lets new people in. How are you feeling about somebody who had an STR and they had the benefit of the income, and then you put in a law that says, well, we're going to take that away for some years. You know, you're not guaranteed to have it next year, even if you apply, because we have this lottery, we have this rotation.
Yeah. I'd have to give a little more thought to that one. I have seen lotteries before in short-term rental regulations. So you have an application period. You get a number of applications. You say, here's our cap at 300, 200, 100, whatever. There's ways to randomize and create a lottery. I think it would take a good bit of work to set up that structure so that it's really fair. Yeah, essentially, if you put a cap on, you are monetizing them, and so you want to be fair of like, oh, is it just the people who got in who had the time to apply first, and everyone else is now out of the process for the foreseeable future. I think we just have to do some thinking around like how would that be structured so that it's fair? Is there a long, you know, is it a 2 or 3 year period, and then everyone has to reapply again, and then there's a lottery. So I've seen things like this before. Anyway.
Okay, so but I guess my thought is, and to me it kind of, I'm a little uneasy about the idea from the standpoint that when somebody does have this, they've been using this income. There's two sides to the story. One, they've been using the income, they depend on the income, and they bought their house because they thought they were going to get this income, and they've got it. And now we're saying, even if you don't have any gap in your applying paying for your fee every year, even if you had no gap, you've done everything you're supposed to do, we're still going to take it away from you because we're going to have a revolving thing.
Well,
is that, but on the other hand, you say, well, other people want to have the same ability to have an STR, so we have to do that. So imagine if there's any legality to it, or I would think it would make people very upset to they've got it and taken it away from them.
Well, well, the thing though is we were talking also about if we're talking right now about full homes, like the idea of rotating these full home permits.
Okay.
If I believe is what we're talking about.
Okay.
If for the full permit, home permits are, even though we were talking about them as different vernacular, we were going to say owner occupied, but not just owner occupied, owner inhabited. This is part of a sort of other conversation we had.
Right.
But the idea being that if we were able to make sure that, you know, we could actually enforce some of these criteria, including the presence of the property owner, then who's to say that, you know, we couldn't have, I'm not suggesting it, all right? I'm just saying that in theory, you could allow unlimited home permits, because we're not losing housing stock. They're renting rooms in their houses while they also dwell there. So it's not like they wouldn't have any access in potentially to that market. They just wouldn't be able to rent their entire house. They would ostensibly have to spend a few years having long-term renting it or something else.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Connor in that. I think that, you know, we're talking about distinctions here between hosted STRs, which, you know, is to me more like a B&B, a historic B&B, and full home STRs, which is more like an economic model. And, you know, they can always short-term rent it, and they can short-term rent it. Long-term rent it, and they can't short-term rent it, and that will pay off the mortgage. So we're not looking at people who are using this money necessarily to stay in their house, because they don't stay in the house.
Right.
And you know, it's just they're making money off of housing stock in Woodstock. And I think that from an economic point of view, we'd rather have many of those be long-term rentals instead of allowing them to be short-term rentals forever. And then the other part of that is, you know, if you get in on it, if you get the STR license and you have it forever, you've got the golden ticket, right? It's like having a New York City taxi license. You know, you've got the golden ticket. You happen to win. No one else can get in the business. So the idea of coming in and going out, to me, is okay, because the going out means you have to long-term rent it for a period of time, which is kind of what we want to have happen from a usage level within Woodstock. But again, the distinction has to be between hosted and not hosted.
Right. And that's an excellent point. Excellent point. So, okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for indulging that.
Sure. And well, two things. Yeah, just to Jeff's point, if there is a lottery system and if you get a permit for 2 years or something like that, it disincentivizes the kind of like property management model of buying homes to be used as short-term rentals full time. Because it doesn't make economic sense if you're only if you're going to get a permit for 2 years, but it's uncertain whether that model would last beyond those 2 years. It kind of it pushes things into providing more long-term rental housing. I think the other thing I was going to say is that if you move into this model of a lottery system, or like a certain period of how long you can have your short-term rental permit, there would have to be this kind of, again, I'm not an attorney, but there would have to be this grace period to notice and make sure that you are starting this process essentially anew with an entirely new set of regulations, so that you're not restricting previously permitted uses for those homeowners.
I agree. I think that if we did do this system, if we put this into effect, we'd have to, now I won't say grandfather, but the existing STR licenses would have to carry through whatever term that they have, and then they'd enter the system after their existing license ends.
Yeah. But this idea is not entirely new. There's other places that I've seen that have done things like this.
so it's a good discussion, although I am watching my clock to some degree too. So
Yes.
so
Okay.
Kai, so as we proceed, so you already talked about 1B.
1B, 1C was just a recommendation on which local STR, which municipal laws in terms of nuisance should be put in
Right.
there. It's kind of vague right now. It's like noise laws, noise ordinances, fire ordinances, just be like really specific
Right.
with which ordinances and regulations in the town are going to be enforced in terms of violations for nuisance specifically.
Yeah, okay.
Also, on enforcement, I just want to mention that the county is putting significant money into the budget to help local municipalities with enforcement of STRs.
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And this is still, as Jeff knows, this is still all up in the air a little bit because we're in the budget season, but there's this potential where there'd be a lot more money for local enforcement or support for local enforcement.
So contact your local legislator and make sure that he or she knows what you need.
Yes, no, truly though.
I
mean, that's the thing I hear most often is we have these short-term rental regulations, but we don't have capacity at the local level to actually enforce them in a meaningful way.
So sounds like a good plan. So okay. So again, I'm watching my clock. So
yep.
It's important to share we agree, share certain laws and figure those out. Penalties.
This is just saying, it was unclear what the penalties were. We did some research on what other municipalities in the Hudson Valley are doing, and this is like pretty standard for fines. So $1,000 for the first offense, $2,000 for the second offense, and then revocation for the third violation. This is based off the Village of Rhinebeck. Okay, moving on.
I want to make sure that we understand the distinction, though, that we talked about, which is the nuisance violation versus the license violation. So nuisance violation to me is a little bit is a much smaller level. You get, and that's kind of what we talk about with the red, yellow. It's like, if it's a nuisance violation, I don't know if it's $1,000 fine. I think it might be initial, warning, and then a 50, much smaller level fines until they become consistent. If it's a license violation, it's got to be significant, $1,000 to $2,000. So we have to have that distinction between the types of violations that they have.
Yep. Yes, thanks for that distinction.
Yep.
And if there's, I think part of this too is like making sure that the town has the capacity to clearly communicate what all of these regulations are, so that when there is violations, no one can say, well, we didn't know about them. There's a very clear process where everything is communicated about what are the rules that you're supposed to follow. If you are not registered, that's a serious offense because it's not like it was a mystery.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
I think this is pretty similar to what Kingston just adopted as well.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so here's another thing. We added an idea that came out of this Totally Blue thing, was a ZRC idea that's been bandied about, is to say, what do you think about the idea if we were to say, if you buy a property, you can't even consider STRing it for some number of years, 3 years, 5 years. The idea being that somebody can't be buying it just as a commodity. They're planning to buy it because they're going to be living there. How does that strike you as an idea, Kai?
Yeah, I've seen it before. We didn't do much exploring of this. I would want to poke around to see who else has done it and how they've done it. I think there are other ways to disincentivize someone from buying it, but this is one way, buying it just to be used as a short-term rental. But this could be one method. I just haven't thought about it enough, so I don't have any strong opinions, but I have seen similar things.
I think part of this too is if licenses are full and we don't grant licenses, and we can really regulate the license granting, you're not going to buy and assume you can get a license right away. And
Yeah.
you're not going to believe you can do an illegal one and not get caught.
Right. Yeah,
So
good point. If it's clearly communicated there's a cap and no more licenses are being permitted, no, hopefully no one would buy a home assuming that they could do it.
Also making sure that we have full enforcement, which again is
Yeah.
talked about that earlier.
It's an issue. Yeah. Okay.
So we're on to objective 2.
Yeah. So regulatory fees and pricing. We did a little research on like what your permit fee is, like $100, $200, and the general like sentiment was fees can't be onerous and they can't be for no reason at all. There has to be a justification for them, but you can charge fees to cover your full cost of implementation, include like administration as well as staff time to fully enforce the regulations. So we made this recommendation of like analyzing what's the overall staff time and cost for actually implementing the short-term regulations, or what would it be if to actually fully enforce it, and then adjusting fees to cover maybe not the full cost, maybe you eat some of the costs, but to at least cover part of it. So there's that one.
Okay, so
I
you
saw the
haven't-
comments.
So
Yeah,
you
go
haven't
ahead.
shared. So you haven't shared a recommended fee structure for the regular fees. We're just agreeing that we're going to look at it.
The recommendation is look at it and adjust your fees to cover costs.
Do you have information on what other towns charge?
I think, I'll look back at my research.
You do at the
But
bottom. I think you
yeah,
have
they're at the bottom.
this document.
It's not, I mean, Woodstock's is lower than a lot of
Mhm.
others, but it's not like
We're
wildly
significantly
lower.
lower than everybody else, actually.
Yeah.
So here's what you're saying.
So there's definitely an
There you go.
opportunity to
Yeah,
raise
there it is.
them, cover more of your costs without
And Granicus has a formula of
being onerous.
you take the peak number of what they make and then times that by 2 or times by 3.
Interesting.
Okay.
There's a lot more information that they're very, very helpful with as well, in addition to all that you guys have done.
Okay, cool.
I noticed the comments. I mean, this is a lot, but the comments from the zoning review committee, revision committee got less and less as we went on.
Well, see, I think this is how far we got.
Okay,
gotcha. So I think that now there are no comments because we didn't get, because we had our meeting and we said, gee, we really need more information from somebody who knows what, some of the reasons behind what the STR task force gave us. So we had a meeting to discuss things and had ideas, but correct.
Gotcha.
This is how far we got.
Okay. Yeah, and so this one, these are really streamlining the implementation of the STR regulations, making it as easy as possible to enforce. This is a lot of the services that Granicus, there are other companies aside from Granicus that provide these services. Granicus is just, they've been in the game a long time. But these are kind of like different modules, as they call them, that you can purchase from Granicus. So you can get the ID, you can set up a module that kind of monitors all of the activity in your community and making sure that it complies with your specific regulations. They have a thing where you can do permitting and tax collection online, so it makes it a lot easier for folks to adhere to the regulations. Rental activity monitoring, so how many times it's being rented per year. These are all additional modules that cost additional money. It's based on how many short-term rentals you have in your community. But anyway, these are a lot of services that for a fee, Granicus or another company can provide to support with the capacity issues at the local level.
Is there an efficiency of scale if the county were to pay Granicus for all across the county and we just then pull what we need from that, or each town has to sign up and pay separately?
Yeah, so it's kind of, I can't like talk about it too much because it's still I don't want to get anyone's hopes up or anything, but there is a proposal to expand the county contract so that individual municipalities that have joined the Housing Smart Communities Initiative, which Woodstock has, would get access to a dashboard so that your code enforcement officer would have a lot of this information already. Just by joining, it's like an incentive for joining the Housing Smart Communities. And then on top of that, there'd be a discount for additional modules. So it would be like 50% of the cost, versus if Woodstock wanted to go out on its own and purchase Granicus's services. This is all, I don't want to jinx it, but I really want it to happen. Yeah.
Knock on wood, everyone.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. It would be great. I'm not saying I'm making it clear that it's not agreed to do so, but just go on record to say it would be great. Okay.
Yeah, so I just put these in here. You can go to the website. I know Urena and others have, some of the housing committee members have talked to a rep from Granicus, so they can provide a lot more information.
When you say we can go to the website, you've said that before. What website again are we going to?
Host compliance. I can look it up really quick.
I have that in the document I've sent to you guys. You'll have that. You'll have links and everything. It's called Granicus. It used to be called Host Compliance. They are now called.
So we're talking about the Granicus website.
Correct.
Yep. Yes, and they'll do a little demo for you.
You'll have that document, and whenever,
But these modules are essentially the modules that they provide, and a little summary of what they do.
So is a good place to start with Granicus for us to like invite them in and give us a presentation?
You could. They also will help you update your ordinances. The one thing I'll say is that they do, it is a for-profit company. The more short-term rentals you have, the more they'll charge. It's not a ton more, but also it's just something to keep in mind. It's like if you're trying to restrict short-term rentals to a certain number, but their business model is based on.
I believe the Granicus fee for consulting on zoning code is like $18,000.
Yeah, I don't know if that's. I don't want to speak too much about that. I don't know if that's entirely necessary.
It's a lot of money. I saw the quote. It's a lot of money.
Yeah,
for us.
Yeah, and I don't think I think I've been working with Kingston on theirs, and there's ways to make it really simple and streamlined without starting from scratch. I think that's maybe like if you're starting from scratch and you don't have any ordinance at all.
Okay. So anyway, we can invite Granicus in to make a presentation of their offerings.
Yeah.
Although even better if the county pays for it all.
Yes. Yeah. And the budget we'll know pretty soon. We'll know next week.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, moving along here. What else?
Okay, so we're coming on down. Of course, this has difficult to enforce without assistance from more sophisticated service. Enforcement, implementation, support. But I don't know if you want me to keep scrolling here.
Yeah, no, that's okay. This is all kind of like, okay, you got this language in your regulation now, but is it really possible to enforce all of these regulations without some support from like an outside company like Granicus?
Like Granicus, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we were just pointing out a couple places where it's like, oh, this would actually help a lot if there was some support. Yeah, you can keep going.
Okay, well, enforcement. Okay, this is all enforcement. STR regulations.
Enforcement.
Well, I'm just
go ahead and we can read it.
STR. I'm just looking where, because this item 3B doesn't talk about Granicus at all.
No, this is really like, let's make it clear in the ordinance what the steps are for the enforcement officer, whoever's implementing the regulations, for someone operating without a permit.
Or STR. Well, I think that would kind of be the ZRC. I think that's I think they're delegating that to us.
Yep. Zoning enforcement officer.
Oh, but it should update the current STR, meaning the law. I think they're talking about the law. Should update the current
Sure.
STR law. STR law.
But I'm not sure for town of Woodstock, like that probably does fall under your
right. That's what we're here for.
powers.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. So those are some things to think about. Okay, STR regulations.
This was another suggestion of just like, is there communication between the zoning enforcement officer and the police department who is dealing with like nuisance and noise complaints and things like that.
So you're not going to tell our ZRC who the STR owners are, but you would tell the police.
No, ZRC. I mean, I'm assuming it's either the building code enforcement or ZRC, whoever is implementing them now. It's just really like
the zoning revision committee. We're the zoning revision committee. We're the ones who are, and I'm on the town board, so I am. And everybody, all volunteers are considered town employees, even though a lot of them are volunteers, not getting any pay. But everybody, the zoning revision committee members are considered town employees. So in any event, and I know you said before that you were hesitant to give us the list of STR owners, but you would put them in the police computer system.
This was from this one. I don't love this one. I think it's probably not that much of an issue. If there's a complaint to the police department, they'll give an address, and there's a sense of like which ones are short-term rentals. And I'm not really sure how useful this one would be.
Well, and I guess I kind of feel like in a way you're asking the police to target people, because if there's a noise issue, it shouldn't matter if they're an STR or not. They should be treating people respectfully at all times and by still enforcing the law.
Right. Yeah, I think this was kind of like a thrown out suggestion if there was some issues of communication between enforcement, but in such a small town, I'm not really sure this is an issue. So, if it is an issue.
I don't think that doesn't feel great to me either.
Yeah.
My question is this. So somebody has an STR and they have numerous violations. They're shooting off fireworks, or there's noise complaints. How does the building department know?
I guess my point though, I mean, they may know because somebody will call them up and say, my neighbor's shooting off fireworks, so that the police department would know it's happening because a neighbor would call in. But I'm not sure whether they should be taken into consideration if it's an STR or not when they go address a noise complaint, because if it's a noise complaint, it's a noise complaint whether the person's a long-term resident or whether they're just there for the weekend.
I understand what you're saying, but my question is, how the police go and they whatever they do and they treat everyone equally, but we're talking about people who have violations, STRs who are violating the law. How does the building department then know that occurred if there's no communication between the police and the building department?
There's a violation. Okay.
It's a violation. So
right. I think that's what this recommendation is getting at, is like,
well, maybe I guess I kind of missed that part here. So if you were to say put list of STR owners in violation or with outstanding violations into the police department.
Right. If there's no communication between noise complaints and short-term rental, the short-term rental list.
So I'm okay with the idea. So I feel like I get it better now. I'm okay with the idea that the police would have them, not because they would treat the people differently, but they have to notify the owner, and then we have to be aware of that there's an STR violation if all these things are happening in one STR, because we need to make address and do a fine and whatever.
Especially for like non-owner occupied units.
Right.
But there's no one. I mean, I think it maybe says in the regulations, but there needs to be like a contact information for every short-term rental permit.
Yes.
So there's some accountability there, but likely not enough communication.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, so I know you started out, Kai, by saying you don't love this item, but based on the conversation, are you feeling like it makes more sense?
I didn't really have a lot of context for this one. Um, yeah, I mean, I think if there are, I don't know how you like to run your meeting, but if there are other members of the short-term rental task force here who help with these recommendations and they want to chime in on this one.
Yeah. Well, my hope is, Kai, it's so special having you here, and you work
Okay.
for the county. You're not a Woodstock resident. So
Sure.
I'm hoping to have your time be efficient and just get through the whole document with your thoughts. And
Sure.
we're going to keep on having meetings, and everybody who joined this meeting is welcome to come back. Our next meeting is the second Tuesday in December. The fourth Tuesday is Christmas. We're not meeting Christmas Day. We'll pick up on the second and fourth Mondays come January. And if you look at the town of Woodstock website and you look at the calendar, you will see our meetings. So, we can be having these discussions, and housing gets to go next, because I know housing is chomping at the bit to go next. And I'm certainly very happy to have anybody who's on the STR task force weigh in as well. So we're going to do a lot of listening, but it is very special having you here today, and I want to make your time efficient.
Okay. Yeah. So to your question again, there just needs to be more. I'm fine with this one as long as there's a really specific intent of why there's the list of STRs is shared in the police.
Yeah, the other part of this is if we do have someone like Granicus working with us, they'll have the list, they'll be given the list, and they'll see who is violating that by looking at who's STRing that's not on the list.
Yep.
They'll send those reports to us, and we'll follow the police, we'll follow the reports.
Right. Yep. They also have a module where there's like a 24/7 hotline that you can call rather than the police. So they'll track those. They'll inform the police to enforce them, but take some burden off of the police department.
Yeah, it's really I think the police have probably better things to do than monitor this. If we can hire someone that does this professionally by scouring all of the websites that people STR on and can just tell us who did what and have the documentation around to prove it too.
Yep. Okay. Moving right along here. Ensure a balance between economic opportunity and impacts on housing affordability. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of evidence that shows if there's an overabundance of really full home short-term rentals in a community, it has a big effect on rental prices and home sale prices. I just referenced kind of like the housing action plan. What our focus and intent is in my job and the Housing Smart Communities. As one of the 12 actions we have is to create short-term rental regulations, specifically that puts a cap on full permits. So that's whole homes that are being used as short-term rentals, and we suggest a cap of 1 to 2% of the municipality's total residential dwelling units. This is what the city of Kingston just did. They capped it at 1% for full permits. So that's 1 to 2%. It varies. It's really up to local volunteers and elected officials who are making these decisions. But we think that 1 to 2% is a fair balance between, not having such a detrimental impact on tourism-based economies where there are some short-term rentals where folks can come and visit, but also not eating so much into the housing stock that you're causing people to be forced out of the community because of rental prices. And also there's a lot of issues we hear about in terms of local business owners not being able to hire folks because employees can't find affordable housing. So right now, this varies, but it's around 10%. So we put in the estimates of like, if it was 2%, it would be a cap of 85 short-term rentals, full permits. And then we're not making a recommendation on home permits.
So I'm sorry, so tell me, so the 85 would be 1% or 2%?
2%. 1%
Okay.
would be 43.
So 2% for Woodstock.
2%, yeah, and this is based on census data, I think from 2022.
Okay. Well, technically speaking, the census was 2020.
Yep. The other reason I like this is that the number of short-term rentals or full short-term rentals that you can have in your community is not fixed at a certain number, but if you're using a proportion, it actually in a way incentivizes you to build more housing units, which can, in a lot of cases, relieve the housing crisis. And so as you build more units, the number of allowable full short-term rentals goes up.
Well, you say that incentivizes, who is that going to incentivize to build a property?
Well, it really incentivizes the town in general, kind of non-linearly, but
okay.
Yeah.
So do you, because this talks about caps on STRF, are you thinking that we wouldn't need a cap on the STRH? Because you got somebody living there and we're just kind of helping them pay their bills because.
Yeah, so I think that's what we talked about too, Laura, was not putting a cap on STRHs or hosted STR.
Well, I think there's more to talk about it. I mean, I'm not 100% there, but I mean, I think it's definitely something you could be more liberal with. I mean, but just to bring this back though, I mean, 1 to 2% was what was it, 80 versus 40 units, and we're closer to 300 or 400 now, realistically. So I mean, it should just show you the urgency of how out of step we are.
Yeah, and that's not counting the ones that are illegal, also, Connor, right?
Well, I mean, it may be again upwards of 400 if we're being pessimistic.
Yeah. And I have no idea what this little eraser thing is doing on my thing. I'm not sure how I got it there, but in any event,
there's a comment about STRs paying occupancy tax. Not all platforms automatically pay occupancy tax, so we can't necessarily use that.
So I'm sorry, what about occupancy tax?
There's a comment about occupancy tax and being able to use how many people are paying occupancy tax is getting a sense of how many STRs there are. Not every single platform automatically pays occupancy tax. Many platforms rely on the owner to pay the occupancy tax instead of paying it themselves. So it's not a guaranteed way to count the actual number of STRs.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Jeff. So I think the question about home permits and putting a cap on those or not, that's really, it should be discussed further. It may be gradual over time too. You start with full permits and see how that runs, and then move in if it's still an issue. But I think it's so hard to tell case by case, but some people really do supplement their income, especially like folks who are retired, who are on fixed incomes. This is a great way to supplement your income. We do want them to rent long-term units as well too, but
okay. So I need to close down. I don't know what happened to this thing because all of a sudden I've got this funny thing up and I'm not, let me close that down. And I'm going to try to open it back up again. Oh, there we go. Because for some reason I had that funny thing on there and I couldn't do anything with it. Open it again. And I'll share my screen again. STRX. Okay, so we're doing better now. That funny thing went away. So, and I started to write something. Well, okay. Oh, I know. So I started to write that we're thinking we're not going to do.
Yeah, I think we intentionally kind of avoided.
Have no. One STR. Yeah, and as Connor says, we'll talk about that later, but cool. Cool. Okay, so where are we headed now? We have a bunch of links here.
Or B. Yeah, some links to just studies showing that like unchecked
right.
levels of short-term rentals really do have a price impact on the price. For B, restricting transfer permit with the sale of the property. Yes, the permit shouldn't transfer with the sale of the property. And later on, I think there's a recommendation for an exception of inheritance.
Yeah.
There's a couple pieces here though, like they're moving parts. So if you do this kind of lottery system where you only have it for a couple years, that would kind of change that dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Yep.
Yeah, this next one, this section E, only the property owner is permitted to register an STR on individual
What
property.
section? Oh,
Sorry.
C. Okay, C.
Or C, section
Oh,
E
gotcha.
of the laws that exist right now talks about corporate ownership.
Oh, violation of interstate commerce
law because the law is making distinction and restrictions based on owner versus non-owner properties. Again, I am not a lawyer, so I'm not going to like make the final call on this one. This was more like open-ended comment of like this needs to be looked at more thoroughly.
Well, but I think, but the whole point though, we're trying to say that one person can only own one STR, and if you are in an LLC, if you're the owner of that LLC and you have an STR by the LLC, you can't go have an STR in your own name. And you're saying that might be a violation of the Commerce Clause?
Because you're restricting on like owner occupied versus non-owner occupied.
No, we're just we've said that one person can only own one STR. So if you're
right. Own one STR.
Yeah, one person can only own one STR. And if you are a person who owns an LLC and you're the only owner of the LLC and the LLC owns an STR, then that's your one STR because you're the person who owns the LLC. So we're trying to say, don't hide behind an LLC. You're still people. And
my understanding is that the New York State Legislature is looking at having to reveal who the owners of an LLC are, that it no longer can be secret. And I think that's something that's pending right now.
So
I think that's correct, Jude. I think that is correct that they're looking at doing that.
So by law, we might not be able to know who the owner of an LLC is.
Well, not now you don't, but
now
you can. At some point in time you can possibly if New York State changes the laws.
But essentially this one is saying like if you are going to apply for a short-term rental permit, you need to disclose ownership stakes in the LLC that's registering for the short-term rental permit. So I think I think to your point, Laura, that's a good idea. It's just the nuances of how that is done.
I mean, there's also questions about ownership by a trust, ownership by a corporation that's not an LLC. There's lots of other types of ownership too that can actually get involved with this.
Yep.
I think realistically, if we can restrict the number of STRs to be 1 or 2%, this becomes less of an issue itself because
that's a good point.
It's unlikely to be as prevalent as it might be now.
Yeah, and my kind of knee-jerk reaction to this was also like this could take a lot of time out of a code enforcement officer's day and expertise to be tracking down ownership stakes in LLCs. But to Jeff's point, if you restrict the number of full permits, it does take care of that. Just a little bit more on the sale of a property when a transfer is permitted, inheritance when it's not permitted, being sold, or it's a gift to a non-relative, not part of inheritance. Again, this is only if you're just putting a cap on it, but you're not doing the lottery system too. Objective 5. Yeah, increase transparency and accountability in short-term rental regulatory implementation. Obviously, this is a very, it's an important issue, and so there needs to be full transparency, which is so great that you guys are doing this in a really transparent and open way. Town board should update the current SDR to include a self-reporting process. Each permits to report on days. Yeah, so this is an interesting one. The updated regulations could use like a self-reporting system. If you went with Granicus, and this is kind of what we're saying at the end here, that wouldn't really be necessary because they track all of those things. If you didn't go with Granicus, it might be nice to have a self-reporting system, even though you could there should be an attestation attached to that so that you are really telling the truth about how many days you've rented it per year. A whole nother thing is, and we don't have to get into this here, but like there's what people are reporting on their taxes for the hotel occupancy tax of how much they've been renting it versus how much they're actually making and whether they're actually being taxed at the level that they should for the activity. But that's a county issue, not a Woodstock issue. Owner must identify where they are advertised, listed. Again, this is, if you went with Granicus, they would have that all that information. I don't think it hurts to put like a question in the form saying which ones you plan to advertise on. But again, Granicus will have all that information automatically.
So tell me why do you need to know if you know where somebody is listed? I mean, Granicus knows where they're listed because Granicus is checking all these sites
I think the thing was, Laura, is that we're not looking at having Granicus when this was first written.
Yep.
We check ourselves, and this way we don't have to check. We don't have to know because Granicus will know, and we don't have to check ourselves. Don't have to know.
Yeah, all these recommendations were before Granicus was part of the issue.
Okay.
And it's obviously like Granicus knows they're thinking in line with what the recommendations are that people have here.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
So it's also it would add a big headache if you had every listing site of every short-term rental that you have and trying to like check those in person from a person doing that.
It's literally impossible.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
it's literally impossible. It's like David and Goliath. It's literally, you're dealing with computers versus humans. We need help.
So the building department told me that what they can do is they can go to an owner and say, produce a printout, because apparently you can have a printout from Airbnb. It shows exactly what your rentals have been, and the building department can ask for that.
Yep.
And that's one way that they can monitor it. Obviously, that's a lot more labor intensive, but they wouldn't have to, actually go in and try to check it themselves. And apparently they have asked for it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's a good method. Airbnb is only one of the platforms. So if you're asking for every activity on every platform for every short-term rental, it would be a little bit onerous.
Good point.
But it is possible.
But that's what Granicus does for a fee.
That's what Granicus does automatically.
Yeah.
And has screenshots of all the stays. So that you can, as stays are happening, there's a record of it.
But on 5C, that's, I do believe registration numbers should appear on all listings. And if Granicus identifies a listing without a registration number, that could be a fine. Same thing with,
Yeah. Yeah, so that's one of the modules where it's like they'll track where all the listings are happening, and if your registration number is not on the online listing, then it gets flagged, and then the local for enforcement can contact them, or Granicus can do it. There's also a bill that may or may not pass that would create a statewide short-term rental registry.
I put the link to that bill from Hinchy
Yeah.
in the chat a while ago.
So but it's unclear whether that's going to happen or not.
It'll take a while. It'll take many years, so that's why we need Granicus now. And they do that. That's great, but
Yeah.
that will be a long time from now.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm
Okay.
still watching my clock. So I think
Yep.
we're getting near the end of the document, but not quite there yet. So assigned permit number for the self-reporting process for LCR permits to self-report on which sites they're using to advertise. Again, Granicus.
Yeah, another one of these kind of like the short-term rental task force was thinking about all these things. But it would be a lot easier if Granicus, we could use Granicus for the registration, STR registration number. This definition of owner occupied, this is kind of just going into this issue, the New Orleans case. I don't think I mentioned the New Jersey case, but I will share that as well. Some recommendations on, this is coming out of, where did I put this? This was somewhere in California, I think, Santa Monica. They had the most kind of like thorough forms of verification of owner occupancy if you are going to go the owner occupancy route. So I put some recommendations on how you can verify it's an owner occupied unit.
Okay, but if we were, but we can avoid this by using the other, by working on those STRH and STRF definitions.
I think so. That's my general thought. I think, there's some risk, but it's not as much of a risk of being in the same district as New Orleans on how they would decide the case. But I think there's, I'm kind of taking a lead from town of Kingston, city of Kingston here. And they've had pretty good enforcement so far on putting a cap, that 1% cap on full permits.
Yep.
Just putting it in there, if it's a cap, if you do go that route, here's the best way to actually set that up.
Right.
Implement Airbnb STR regulation. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Just like more clear guidance. I'm not sure what to what this is 5F now I'm talking about. To what degree this is happening. Just really clearly communicate everything that needs to be done by a short-term rental owner who's applying for a permit.
Okay. So kind of provide
Little
a
guidance
task list.
document.
The task list. Or that's really kind of what you're saying here.
Yeah, with that one. And then the last one is, we've heard this in Woodstock, but in other places too. I think it's becoming less of a thing after, like, post-pandemic. But, their real estate agents need to know what the short-term rental regulations are. Because if they're selling homes as if they could be a weekend home and you can also do short-term rentals for other periods, it changes the potential price of the home. But in reality, if there is a cap on short-term rentals, especially non-owner occupied short-term rentals or home short-term rentals, then you're kind of selling something that's not actually possible.
But here's the issue. The issue is, any realtor anywhere can be selling a house in Woodstock, and sometimes people buy a house in Woodstock without a realtor.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. To me, this is unrealistic. It's an unrealistic thing to say.
Fair.
Because you totally don't know who is going to sell a house in Woodstock.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know whether you're saying every realty office in Woodstock ought to have one. Maybe you know all the realty offices in Woodstock, and they, but
The bottom line is it's up to the buyer to make sure that they know what they're buying and make sure that they can do what they want to do with it. The
100%.
can only give them advice, and it's really up to the buyer to pursue that. And if they don't find out for real, then it's up to them.
Yeah, I
we
think
talk about the same thing with scenic overlay. It's like
right,
it's
zoning,
really
you need to do your research on what isn't allowed in zoning before you buy a property. I think the real thought here is like make sure the town is doing as much as possible to be transparent about what is required on the town website or wherever they're going to communicate.
It's got to be obvious. I mean, with every, because you're not going to go through the whole zoning law, but if we can make things that are clear,
right?
Or these cases like STRs, or the other example is the scenic overlay. Things that are significant or different with our town than other towns.
Right, like pretty unique.
Yeah.
And I think another one would be like if there is a cap, just really communicating clearly that the cap has been met and there are no more permits being issued for full.
So again, I just put a note. I mean, I agree with you. There's the perfect world, and you're talking about the perfect world, but we're in the real world here, and in the real world here, again, I don't know who we're supposed to be, who would be given this STR law to, and but because again, a Woodstock realtor can be selling property in any in any town.
I think we're just saying that we just have to make sure it's clear that there's a summary someplace that people can find.
Yep. Yeah,
Right.
and I think we
put the entire zoning code.
Put this in as more like, hey, this is an issue that's come up in the past. Just be aware. That people have been sold homes assuming they can rent them out full time, but then there's a cap on them and they get frustrated.
I guess, and I think the way sales happen is, for example, our assessor's office doesn't know somebody bought a property till they bought it. I mean, so it's not like any employee in the town is going to know a property is going to be sold. So it's not like, it's
right.
If we asked an employee of the town to do it, that would be one thing because they would know, but they would find out too late that something's going to be sold.
Yep.
But anyway, so anyway, but I like what Jeff said about the goal: make a summary clear, make it available to people.
And that is it. This is just a little summary of some other good short-term rentals in the Hudson Valley, and then a couple in California that I liked that you can, be inspired from.
Yay. Yay. So I thank you very much, Kai.
Sure.
Because I think because when we had our meeting in the ZRC before and started discussing this, it seemed like the perfect place to start really was, instead of us trying to go through it, that understand the intent. And because of your role in the county, you understand the intent, you understand reasons behind it. So I want to make sure we made your time efficient. I know the housing, Urena and others on the housing committee are all ready to go with the presentation. So my plan is that we'll start that. My plan is that we will start that at our first meeting in December, which I think is on let me go pull my calendar up. December 11th. So our December 11th meeting is still going to be STRs, and it will be talking about, it'll be having the housing committee go first and talk about their input. I know we have people that were on the STR task force on here. So the housing committee is in the queue because they've been in the queue. They've been asking for a while to speak. And I'm certainly happy to hear what housing committee people have to say. But I'm sorry, happy to hear what the STR committee people have to say. But in my plan is to have the housing committee speak next because, again, they've been in the queue for a while. And Kai, I kind of popped you ahead of the housing committee. So they thought they were next, but Kai, you were next. And then we'll go to the housing committee, and then we'll go to the STR committee. And we're still listening, but we're going to, as a zoning revision committee, be deliberating. But this is a lot of really great conversation. I haven't had a chance to read all the chats because we've been talking with Kai. I will capture all the chats. Presumably Zoom captures the chats, but in case they don't, I'll make sure I capture the chats, and we'll keep them as input as well. is there any zoning revision committee member or housing committee member? I'm sorry, say again?
I think that was just some background noise.
Background noise. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Connor. I can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask really quick. I mean, again, we don't have to extrapolate on this, but we've been talking earlier about ADUs, and there's a bit of back and forth about that. Just in a quick, your opinion, Kai. I mean, we had been talking at one point about making it so that the second, if we were going to allow 2 ADUs to be built on a property, the second would have to be a long-term rental. I'm wondering if you know of any examples, or if there would be anything to restrict us from saying the first has to be a long-term rental and the second could be an Airbnb.
The code currently stands, the proposed code currently says that the first ADU cannot be a short-term rental.
Well, the code we're proposing, the
That's what I'm saying. The currently proposed code is the first cannot be a short-term rental.
The currently proposed code, yes.
Never.
Yeah.
However, if you don't, this is what I think needs to also be addressed, is that if you don't intend to do a second ADU, there is no, doesn't say anything in the proposed code that stops it from being, it'll stop it from being a short-term rental, but it won't stop it from being an out of reach or, unachievable, non-affordable.
We can't enforce people's rents. We just can't.
You can't.
Yeah, I don't.
A short-term rental being allowed. Only the primary house should be allowed. That's part of the zoning, but anyway.
Yeah, I think that those are 2 different issues with the zoning update and the short-term rental overlapping, but we could get into a whole other conversation about that. But I think to Connor's question, as the currently proposed zoning code, first one has to be a long-term rental. And I think that the combination of if we're assuming that a ADU is considered a dwelling unit and would be a full permit, the combination of restricting short-term rentals on the first ADU and then also having a cap on full permits would do enough to generate a good balance between short-term rentals and long-term rentals.
Yeah, so that I think you're right, Kai, is that if the ADU is a housing unit, and if the cap is on numbers of housing units, that falls inside the cap.
Right.
And so
does that answer your question, Connor?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anything, and I know people have been so anybody else from the zoning revision committee or the housing committee want to say anything at this point in time?
One of the things that there's a lot of different definitions going on, so I definitely would suggest to keep that as those definitions as living documents. I think it's an excellent start. Sure. I think you got to really look at what else is going on, because in the report I'm bringing, there's a bunch of that, and I might add on some of those specifically for next time. But I think it's really important to think about that. There's also some more updated stuff, but one of the things that I came across, and it was sort of shocking to me, I was like, whoa, I didn't know this was happening, is called this arbitration. So this ability, so you might want to look into that a little bit as well. That might have to be part of the definition, and we have to look at that a little bit more as well. I don't know do you know anything about that, Kai? Have you read about that?
Could you explain a little bit more about?
Let me get, so it's, let me see.
While you look at that, Erin, I want to answer something that Michael Henry put on the chat, which is the other classification we haven't talked about is seasonal rentals. And that doesn't fit in either the hosted or the full home. And we need to kind of describe and figure out what we're going to do with that. I think that our talking in the past is that seasonal rentals should be long-term, essentially, and it should be no more than a certain number of days per year that you can do a seasonal rental. We haven't really defined that very carefully, I think. But it definitely is historically something that's been done in Woodstock that I think should be allowed, is a different definition than short-term rentals.
Yeah. So the thing
But I think, Jeff, that you are allowed to do a 30-day rental.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
that would be your long-term rental. I mean, that there's no regulation prohibiting you from doing a rental for longer than 30 days.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Drew. And that's what I think of as a seasonal. It's got to be at least 30 days.
I think there's also, when you're a long-term renter, having 30 days notice to have to move, and then you go to another place that has 30 days, and then you have to move, and then another place. So short-term is kind of unreasonable when it's only 30 days. I know, and I'll bring this to the next time, that 60 to 90 is a little more reasonable. And I think that's why maybe in the definition that they put the 60 days as a minimum. But what I wanted to say really quickly is to look into, and I have it in the document that it was sent to you, take a look at. It's called rental arbitration, which is the act of renting a property long-term and then re-renting it short-term on vacation rental sites.
Oh, you mean like if one of your tenants is
arbitrage, sorry. Rental arbitrage.
If one of your tenant, if you have a rental property and one of your tenants goes out and
there's a whole article on it, and they go into that the owner is part of the deal, like they do it together.
Oh, I see.
So there's a whole there's a lot, and that's potentially already happening. It has been happening, and we've just sort of become enlightened by that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to ask Granicus about that.
Hopefully they catch that too, Irina. Hopefully they catch that kind of thing too.
Yeah, I would assume that, I mean, if you are, whether you are registered as a home or a long-term, or sorry, a full permit, if you used Granicus, they would be able to catch that. But that's a good point.
Yeah. So
I've heard a little bit about that.
Yeah, the document I sent you guys have links so you can look. It's right in there. And I think what I'll do is I'll try to bring some more zoning language next, like a supplemental document to that as well, to help with narrowing in on some of the things you talked about today. Will you be joining us too, Kai, next week?
I think, yeah, the 12th.
Yeah. Or the 11th. It's
11th.
the Monday. It's the second Monday of December will be the 11th, I believe.
I have a quick question that kind of reflects what Irina talked about. So does New York State define long-term rentals as 30 days or more? Is that a state thing, or is that just because I've seen a lot of contracts?
30 days or more. I mean, yes, that is considered. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak confidently on the New York State law, but that's typically like what's in most municipal law.
Yeah.
It's 30 days or more.
It's not required though, and it's not against the law to do more days.
It's not against the law, yeah. You can also do month to month.
Jeffrey, the land Goodman, I think it was, he was a land use planner that is very specific to writing STR laws that does work with Granicus. We were talking about that too when we were asking him questions about zoning. It's just what's common is that they say under 30 days is short term. That's just common, but it's not necessarily a law against doing more days. That's my understanding of what he was saying and what I've seen.
Jeff, I'm curious about like the motivation.
My question is really, it's more about long-term rentals, and oftentimes you'll have a contract for a 1-year long-term rental and it goes month to month after that. Or what's happening in Woodstock a lot now is long-term renters are saying, I'm going to go month to month from the very beginning of the contract, and you don't have certainty of occupancy if you're a long-term tenant, which can be stressful.
Yes, definitely. I mean, you're allowed to do that, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think you can restrict that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna look
Okay.
that up though.
Okay, so I am still watching my clock, and we've overrun. We will often go an hour and a half. We've been 2 hours.
Okay.
So and Kai, that's wonderful that you're considering coming back to join us on the December 11th.
6:30.
6:30. It'll be Zoom.
Okay.
I'll be sending out the link to the calendar entry, because I think the link does change for each meeting. So in case it does change for each meeting, I'll resend the link to the calendar entry, which has the link to the Zoom. So in any event, we will be and so at the next meeting, again, it's going to be the housing committee will lead off the discussion, just like Kai, you did this time. So I'll be turning to the housing committee to lead off the discussion and have people weigh in. So I know we had a lot of people on the call that didn't get to speak. I'm going to hang on to I'm going to grab all the chats, but come on back December 11th, because at some point it was important. I thought it was important to talk to Kai first and hear what Kai had to say. And we will eventually get to everybody.
Hi, thank you very much. This was great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Totally. Thank you, Kai. Totally.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to stay on to grab the chats. But the meeting, I'm adjourning the meeting. I don't know if I had a second or from our ZRC, but anyway, we're adjourning. We're adjourning at 8:30. So
Thank you, everybody.
Good night,
totally.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
How do I get out of here?
Good question.
Um.
I'm trying to get to the chat here.
Okay.
Oh, where is the chat? There we go. Chat.
Laura, hi, it's Michael Henry. We've sent an email to you a couple of times with our markup of the short-term rental task force recommendations, which actually I think Kai used our structure, which we're flattered by, without attribution. But I don't know if you've been getting our emails. We've not gotten any response for you. We really would like to be part of the discussion. We think this meeting tonight revealed to me again that there's a lot of basic information about how short-term rentals operate and how the platforms operate and how enforcement has been working that I think isn't because you guys are busy with 1,000 issues that you don't have that information at hand. So I think we have something to offer. Obviously, we have a point of view on some things. There's a lot of overlap with what we advocate, with what everyone else is advocating. I think there may be a misunderstanding of how we view the issue. We also don't want absentee investors buying up 10 houses in town. We also don't want, noise and trash complaints. We also consider ourselves part of the community. I've been here since 2004. I've raised my kids here, and I don't want to have to leave. I want, and there's a lot of our members in a similar situation. And I think there's a bit of a tendency to demonize the short-term renter, as the big cause of the housing affordability crisis, which is all over the Hudson Valley, not unique to Woodstock, and sort of over deterministic, and so when I see these, Kai's 1% to 2%. First of all, I don't think his numbers are probably very accurate about how many actual active short-term rental units there are. I think people undercount that the Woodstock Building Department has, in fact, been cracking down on people who are operating without permits. They've been we've had lots of members who are complaining that they've been busted. So I doubt there are 486 active short-term rentals going on. I'd like to find a way to get a better handle on that. Anyway, so things like that, I don't want to it's been a long night for you. I appreciate how well you run the meeting.
No, thank you. Yeah.
But I think we have something to offer.
Well, and my goal is this is going to be a process where we're listening. We listened to Kai tonight, primarily to Kai tonight. We're going to be listening primarily to the housing committee at our next meeting. I mean, I'm happy to add you to the agenda to speak as a topic. So I'll tell you, life has been very busy for me, But the fact of the matter is, when you're running for office,
Yes.
campaigning takes up time. So there are things that
you had my vote, so there's that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so very much, but much appreciated, and never taken for granted, but definitely much appreciated. So I mean, it's just things got really busy, and now I'm revving up again. Not to mention the fact that my sister from England stayed with me for a week, so she was a priority for a week. So there were anyway,
no worries about it.
But getting back to normal, I would say. So getting back to normal.
Okay.
So I'm glad you could make it tonight, and I'm certainly happy to have you as a speaker, as the primary focus of one of our meetings, because we need to. Somebody said in this call, balance, and I 100% agree. Balance is totally what we want to do. So and I think we do need to listen, and I don't want to cause anybody when there's somebody. And Jeff put his finger on it a bit to say, if you bought an STR as a commodity, this is how you're going to make money, is you're just buying up properties in Woodstock and you're just going to run them out. You're never going to live there. That's a commodity. But when you're talking about people where the way they're able to stay in their house is because they have this income, that is important. I don't want to be disrupting people who this is the way they're living in Woodstock. They can't live here if they don't STR. I don't want to be causing.
No, and I appreciate both yours and Jeff's sanity on the whole issue and balance.
Yeah.
You know, my situation, as many of our members, is somewhere in between. It's my second home, so I can't crime poverty, but
Right.
I'm also not wealthy, right? I'm an artist. I'm an actor. I'm a musician.
Yeah.
And I love Woodstock, right?
Right.
And I hope to retire, or not retire, whatever retire means. But now that my kids are out of school in the city, I hope to move up full time.
Mm-hmm.
If I sell my home because I can't short-term rental it, chances it's not going to be an affordable house. It's not.
Right.
It's going to go most likely to someone else who is a part-timer or weekender, except rich enough to afford to not do short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help the community. It doesn't bring in tourist dollars. And it certainly doesn't increase housing stock. So
yeah.
So I think most of our members with full houses, they're nowhere near the affordability threshold for a house. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I was just taking a peek a second ago. What I would ask you to do, if you wouldn't mind, but I'm not going to ask you to do it on this call because it's recorded. Maybe you can email me your phone number, because then if you email me your mobile number, I can send you a text from mine, and you'll have a way to reach me one-on-one, because I think it makes sense. And as I said, our meetings are the second and fourth Monday of the month. We're of course going to be skipping the 25th of December. Sure. So there just won't be a meeting then, but we'll be back to the second and fourth Monday of the month. So you do know when we're meeting. You can come to all of them if you'd like. And I do think that you should be a speaker at one of the meetings.
Yeah, either myself or Heather. Heather Cross is also, part of our steering group. And that'd be great. It turns out it looks like I do have a conflict on December 11th. I'll see if I can shift that. Heather will probably be there if I'm not. But
well, December 11th, the focus will be the housing committee. Oh, okay. And I also want to let the STR task force members speak. Yeah. If they so choose. So you'll definitely get a shot. If it's not the 11th, we're going to meet again on the 25th of and that seems odd. If it's the 11th, it would be the 25th. Right. So what am I?
And then it's New Year's Day on the 1st.
I'm sorry, December 8th.
December 8th.
I said the 11th to people before, and they're all going to get confused. So I've confused everybody. Anyway, December 8th and December 22nd.
I'll put that in my book.
Oh, so we're no, wait. Here we 27th. No, it is December 11th. It is December 11th, is the Monday.
Right, December 11th, but then January 8th.
Oh, so you're saying you won't be available December 11th, but you might be available January 8th or January 22nd.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can switch something for the 11th to be there. But we were sort of informally on the STR task force. We were it was a very confusing situation. Bill invited us to be on it, so we were on it, but we weren't official members. So That was,
So,
and then
so
no one
thank-
was in charge, so we started. Lisa actually started trying to organize the meetings and set agendas because Marina Elena didn't have that role. So it was all very confusing what the official roles were. So I don't think we were.
Well, there you go. So anyway, we've got it now. All I
Right.
know is they're done. They're done. They did a report, and we got it now. So
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
After the meeting.
Thank you very much, and we'll all talk soon.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.